right, welcome back to another episode. This is Mike Robinson, and this is episode 2 of the NRS Sports Podcast. All right, so today's topic, I want to give my early playoff predictions. Currently, as I'm recording this video, we are about midway through the NBA season, close to about 40 games in, and I feel like it's a good spot to kind of like give predictions. Now, a lot can change before playoff time. Obviously, we're midway through the season. There are teams that could, drop down in the standings, and there's teams that could rise up in the standings. And then come playoff time, sometimes it's anybody's game. Just because there's some teams that, due to injuries or other unforeseen circumstances, can kind of struggle in the regular season and then turn it around come playoff time, and then vice versa. Some teams that seem to overperform in the regular season might have a really good regular season record. They get into the playoffs and they kind of either fade. Again, could be due to injuries, but could be due to just fatigue of the long grind of a regular season. Or oftentimes what happens is sometimes the playoff basketball is just a different ball game. And the way teams prepare for other teams in the playoffs is something different when they're going from team to team to team in the regular season. A lot of times they play teams, and it might be weeks or months later before they play that team again. So a lot of times they're just trying to win a majority of their games, whereas playoff basketball, teams will really lock in on an opponent and study them and break them down in film sessions and really trying to pick apart whatever sort of strategies, game plan, play calling, different offensive sets and stuff like that, defensive tendencies, the whole works. And then that's where a lot of veteran experience comes into play going into the playoffs. But anyway, so I want to give my breakdown. Don't want this to be too long of a video. Want to kind of be straight and to the point with this breakdown. So I'm pulling up right now the standings as of right now, and I'm gonna start with the Eastern Conference. So if anybody doesn't know, I'm based here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and so I am a Bucks fan. So my team is the Milwaukee Bucks. I was born in Chicago. I'm actually originally from Chicago, but we moved to Milwaukee when I was pretty young. So I pretty much, once I really got into basketball, I was living here in Milwaukee, so I gravitated towards the Bucks. I really fell in love with the Bucks when Ray Allen played in Milwaukee, and so that just became my team, and then I just kind of been riding with them ever since. I was initially, as a kid, a Bulls fan, but particularly Michael Jordan. I was a big Michael Jordan fan, and if you watch my last episode, I did pick Michael Jordan as my GOAT, my greatest of all time. And yeah, you can watch that episode if you want the breakdown. There's some other little details I maybe left out, didn't add, but for the most part, I think that pretty much covered it. And I just think LeBron has he's just this close to me, in passing Jordan. And there has been some times where I kind of went back and forth on that debate or opinion or whatever, but ultimately I'm siding with Jordan. I just don't think it'd be tough for anyone, to me, in my opinion, to ever surpass him in my mind. But that's just an opinion. Anyway, so as it currently stands in the East, we got the Cleveland Cavaliers sitting on top at number 1 with the best record in the East. They are 4 games ahead of the Celtics at number 2. Celtics are number 2 in the East, followed by the Knicks, number 3, followed by the Magic, Orlando Magic, at number 4. They're currently the 4 seed. The Milwaukee Bucks are sitting at 5. We've been struggling this season, and I'll get to them in a second. The Miami Heat are the 6th seed. The Atlanta Hawks are the 7th seed. The Pacers are the 8th seed. That would be the normal 1 through 8 standings to for positions into the playoffs. But as we know, there is the play-in ever since they introduced that. So the ninth seed and the 10th seed do have a chance to potentially play their way into the 8th seed spot to make the playoffs. And so the ninth seed is the Detroit Pistons. The 10th seed currently is the Chicago Bulls. And I wanna mention this too, because I think they have a chance to make the playoffs, and that's that the 76ers are currently the 11th seed. Below that, I don't really think any of those teams have a chance to potentially make the playoffs, so they're not really worth talking about. But you got the Brooklyn Nets, the Hornets, the Raptors, and at the very bottom, the Wizards. So I don't personally think either of those teams are gonna make some big push to make the playoffs. I think they'll remain a bottom seed team, and they'll be positioned in the next lottery for the next draft or whatever. But so my first prediction right off the bat, I think the 76ers are where they're at currently due to injury, on top of team chemistry that is a normal hurdle that any team has to get over once they make a major trade, especially a player that has a bit of star status, someone that's not just a role player that's just going to be a glue guy. The 76ers acquired Paul George, and so Paul George is like a major player that changes the dynamic of the team. So they have to build chemistry together to get success. Now, mind you, Paul George is a good player. He should eventually add to their success in due time. But it takes time to build that chemistry. And so right away, they haven't been able to do that properly because of injury. And then with both Paul George and Embiid being sidelined with injuries, that team has struggled to maintain success so far. Currently, their record is 14-20, but they are 6-4 in their last 10 games, so just above 500. The Bulls is right above them at the 10th seed spot, with a record of 17-19. The Bulls, they're a team that has struggled as of late, and they're a team that has some controversy surrounding their star player with Zach LaVine, and some trade rumors surrounding the team. So that's a team that I personally don't expect them to be putting up a really tough fight to win many games in hopes of making the playoffs. They're a team that doesn't have high expectation or high aspiration, and I think that they're a team that will ultimately, kind of not really fight hard in order to make the playoffs. So I expect that not only will the 76ers win healthy and their star players are playing together, not only do I believe that they will start to come together to increase their record and make a playoff push, but also think that the Bulls may fade. So I do think the 76ers will climb their way up, at least to a 10th seed spot, putting the Bulls back into the 11th seed spot. I want to see if there's any other teams. Other than that, for the most part, I think the rest of the standings in the East aren't really going to change much. And you'll see too when I talk about the Western Conference, similar situation. We're about midway through. I don't see many teams winning many more games, to some higher rate or percentage, in order to change the standings much. If anything, you might see a couple of teams kind of flop positions. But for the most part, I personally believe that most teams are gonna pretty much stay where they're at in the current standings. So going into the playoffs, starting with the play-in, the 76ers would have to play against the Detroit Pistons in the 9th, 10th seed battle to see which one of those teams can play in for the 8th seed spot. I do believe if it comes down to the Detroit Pistons and the 76ers, again, I have a little more hope and belief and faith in that team, their ability with Joel Embiid. He's such a dominant player, and Paul George, all healthy. I do believe that team could beat out the Detroit Pistons. The Detroit Pistons have been a team that's been pretty much near the bottom of the Eastern Conference in recent history. But I do believe they're a team that's getting better and better every year. And they're pretty much a tough, scrappy team. Like they will give any team that plays them a run for their money. They're going to play hard and put up a fight, but I don't think they quite yet have the talent, the experience, or the cohesiveness as a team to beat out a veteran team with more talent. And so I do think if the Pistons face off against the 76ers currently, that the 76ers would beat them out. And then the next part of the play-in is that the 7th seed and the 8th seed, their positions are not guaranteed. The 7th seed and the 8th seed first play each other to see who will gain the 7th seed spot, and then the loser of the two between the 7th and the 8th seed then plays the winner of the 9th and 10th seed game. So assuming that the positions don't change going into the playoffs, the Hawks are sitting at 7 and the Pacers are sitting at 8. Now, like I said, first prediction is I think that the 76ers record will improve enough to at least get them to a 10th seed spot. Maybe 9th seed, but at least 10th seed, which means they would battle the Pistons. If for some reason the Pistons kind of fade going into the playoffs and it's the Bulls in their place, I still think either way, either matchup, if the 76ers play Pistons or Bulls, I think the 76ers will win. I believe that the Hawks and the Pacers would keep the 7 and 8 seed spot. If those two play, my prediction with those two is that I think the Pacers would beat out the Hawks in that matchup. And one of those reasons I feel like is because the Hawks is one of those teams where they play up to the level of their competition. It's like they get an extra boost out of playing a really high-ranked team with some star players. I believe Trae Young brings his A game anytime he's playing one of the top teams in the NBA with big names, big star power. It's just some extra level of motivation that he plays with, this extra chip on his shoulder. Playing against some of the teams that are like just the hard-working, grit and grind, blue-collar teams that don't have the star-studded power, big names and all that kind of stuff. I don't think the Hawks tend to perform as well against those teams. And the Pacers are a really, really good team. Just in the past year or two, Pacers have performed really well and been one of the higher seeded teams. They're not doing as good this season, but I do think they carry with them that same talent and potential, and can be a tough out for any team that they face going into the playoffs. And I believe they are not fazed at all by Trae Young and the Atlanta Hawks. The Pacers will they'll play consistent, they'll play smart basketball, team basketball, and I think that the Pacers can outwork and outperform the Atlanta Hawks in that matchup and beat them out. So first little upset is that I do think the Pacers would beat them out. assuming that they maintain their 7 and 8 seed positions, they would end up getting flipped. And I believe that the Pacers would make it into the playoffs as the 7th seed. So then the Hawks would have to play the 76ers in an 8th seed matchup. Well, basically the loser of the 7-8 battle versus the 9-10 matchup. And second upset prediction, and I guess I just don't have faith that the Hawks. I just don't have the faith that the Hawks can beat certain teams, certain matchups, and I do think the 76ers would have their number, assuming they're healthy. If Joel Embiid is healthy, Paul George, Tyrese Maxey, if their team is healthy going into the playoffs, I think they pose a little too much skill and just all around ability to beat out the Hawks. Or I'm sorry, for the Hawks to beat out the 76ers. So I predict the 76ers will beat out the Hawks for the 8th seed spot, which means that the Hawks would be out of the playoffs. Currently, as it stands, if they remain in the bottom bracket, in the 7th and 8th seed bracket, I do believe that they would get beat out come the play-in, and the 76ers just outside the play-in would make their way into the playoffs as the 8th seed. So that would mean going into the regular playoffs for the first round, you'd have the Cavaliers as the 1 seed facing off against the 76ers as the 8th seed, the Celtics as the 2 seed facing off against the Pacers as the 7th seed, the Knicks as the 3rd seed. I believe they would play against the Miami Heat as the 6th seed, and the 4 or 5 seed matchup I believe would be the Orlando Magic and the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, starting with the Cavaliers versus the 76ers, I believe that the Cavaliers is so much more consistent of a team, play so much better basketball. They have both offense and defense. They're really, really strong on both ends of the court. And even though a healthy Joel Embiid is a tough player to guard and handle, I just believe that the 76ers are too inconsistent. And even if healthy, they tend to get kind of banged up and worn down through the playoffs. I think in a tough series against a really good opponent, I think the 76ers are gonna come up short, have bad games, and ultimately I believe the Cleveland Cavaliers would take that series. It could be as early as a clean sweep, 4-0 sweep. I think that's possible, depending on the health and in injury status or whatever. But even if relatively healthy, I don't see it going past 6 games. My prediction, I'll settle on 5 games. I think that would go 5 games with the Cleveland Cavaliers beating out the 76ers. As tough as I think that they will put up an effort to make their way into the playoffs, I think they would lose going up against the 1 seed. Second matchup, the Celtics versus the Pacers. The Pacers will give the Celtics a tough battle. I predict it'll go 6 games. Don't think it'll go 7, but I definitely don't think it'll be a sweep. But I think the Celtics would beat out the Pacers. I think the Pacers are just not quite to the level of the Celtics. The Celtics have too much talent, offensive ability. They can defend. They just have more talent on that team. And yeah, I just don't predict an upset in that matchup. I think there'll be good games. I think every game will be relatively close. But I do think the Celtics will prevail and beat out the Pacers in that matchup. The next one is the New York Knicks versus the Miami Heat. Now, this might come as a shock to some people, but this is my first upset prediction. I predict if the Miami Heat remain the 6th seed going into the playoffs and they face up against the Knicks at the 3rd seed spot, I think that Miami can beat the Knicks. It's going to be a tough matchup. I think it'll go 7 games. I think it'll go a full 7 games. But my main reasoning is because really Jimmy Butler. Assuming Jimmy Butler doesn't get moved by the trade deadline. If Jimmy Butler remains on the team, I think going into the playoff Jimmy Butler is a different animal. A different player. I mean, he's a different beast. Whatever term you want to use for him. Playoff Jimmy is something totally different than regular season Jimmy. And I believe this year more than ever, he's got something to prove. He's got a chip on his shoulder. He's got something to prove. He wants to prove to the entire league, to the entire world, that he is that guy and that he deserves whatever contract he's looking for. And he will play his ass off. He's not a player that will... He's a player that will rise to these type of moments and play his very best. New York, on the other hand, they've been having really good regular season success so far, but they are a relatively newer constructed team, and playoff things get a little weird. Things get a little different. And we've seen them get upset in some regular season games so far. Just even like the Atlanta Hawks, beating out the Knicks, the New York Knicks recently, and I think they beat them on their home court, which is pretty embarrassing. New York, they just need one player to come up short. One weak link for the Miami Heat to expose them, and I could see them falling apart come playoff time. And then as a team, as a newer team that's still building some chemistry with some of their newer players, figuring out people's roles, come playoff time, and just some bad games and things not falling for them. I could see things getting a little weird for the New York Knicks, and ultimately, I believe the Miami Heat and Jimmy Butler would expose any weakness in that team, and I do believe they're a pretty good team. Hold on a second. Hey, go upstairs. I'm recording. But my prediction, I think it'll go 7 games. It'll be back and forth series, but I do think the Miami Heat can upset them, and I'm predicting an upset. I'm predicting, like I said, that they're a team with something to prove. The entire organization will come together come playoff time. And then lastly for the first round, the Orlando Magic versus the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, the Bucks is my team, and I'm a little biased. I have faith in them despite them underperforming this year so far, and even as of late, been looking kind of shaky and been kind of so-so. I think that the Bucks might struggle a bit, but I do think they have a little more talent and ability to succeed in the playoffs, whereas the Orlando Magic is still a relatively newer team and a little bit unproven. I do think it'll be a tough series. I'm predicting it'll go 7 games. I believe it'll be a tough battle. I believe that the Bucks will struggle, but get over the hump and beat them in 7 games. So that's upset prediction. I don't know at this point, 2 or 3. Yeah, because technically, the Hawks getting upset by the 76ers is kind of 1, and then Miami Heat would have upset, and I think I'm betting on the Bucks to pull an upset over the 4th seed. The 4-5 seed is almost equal in terms of standings in that matchup. The 4-5 matchup is usually a close matchup anyway, but so it's not much of an upset. But I do think the Bucks can get it done come playoff time. So then going into the second round. In the second round, the Cleveland Cavaliers would match up with the Milwaukee Bucks, and the Boston Celtics would end up matching up with the Miami Heat. Now, as much as I love the Bucks, and I'm predicting them to win in the first round of the playoffs, I think versus the Cleveland Cavaliers, I think they're gonna fall apart. I do think the Cavaliers, I think it's a little more their year than the Bucks' year. They've been playing really, really well, very cohesive as a team. Like I said, they play really good team basketball. They play good team defense. I think that they're just they have better chemistry, and I think going into the playoffs they're going to be really tough, really strong, really confident. And whereas the Bucks might come out of the first round going 7 games, I think the Cavaliers will be a little more fresh coming out of their series, probably in 5 games. And relatively easier series. On top of the fact that I do think that they're a better team this year currently, and so I do think the Bucks will give them a tough time, put up a good fight. I'm predicting it'll go 6 games. But I'm gonna give the nod to the Cleveland Cavaliers in winning in that second round matchup. Then Boston versus Miami. Again, I'm riding with Jimmy in round 1 to upset the New York Knicks. And I think he'll put up one hell of a fight versus the Boston Celtics. But I don't think Miami will beat the Celtics. On top of that, I don't think it'll go 7 games. I think it'll be another 6-game series with the Celtics winning. I think they'll maybe fall short a couple games. Maybe not play as tough. Jimmy Butler will give them one hell of a battle, but I think the Celtics, they're too tough, they're too talented, there's too much depth. They have the combination of players on the Celtics would be just too much for Jimmy Butler. Yeah, they got Tyler Hero, they got Bam Adebayo. Again, Miami doesn't have a bad team. They have a decent team, but I do think the Celtics are a little better. They will prevail, which means going into the conference finals in the East will be the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Boston Celtics. I believe that in that matchup, despite Cleveland being the higher seed and performing extremely well this season in a 7-game series in the playoffs, I think that the Celtics will pull off the win. Technically, it'd be an upset. Again, not much of an upset because you're talking about the defending, returning champs from last year as the 2 seed, and right above them is Cleveland. They've just achieved a lot this season so far with the top record in the East, and I believe they'll finish the season with the number 1 seed in the East. But I do think that in that matchup, Boston will win. So technically, it's an upset. And Boston will be the Eastern Conference champs, and they will be returning to the finals. I'm going to predict that goes... I'm going to predict it goes 6 games. Yeah. Weirdly, Boston's one of those teams where they can comfortably win series, but I don't think they sweep anybody. I don't think they sweep the Pacers. Versus the Miami Heat, I don't think that they would sweep them. If for some reason the New York Knicks win and they're in that spot, don't think they sweep the Knicks. And they're definitely not going to sweep the Cleveland Cavaliers. They'll be tough battles. I think they'll comfortably win. I don't think it'll go 7 games, but I do think it'll go 6. So that's my prediction for the East. Now, moving to the West. Hopefully I can break this down as quickly as possible. Hopefully you guys are enjoying my early playoff predictions so far. Okay, so far in the West, we got the Oklahoma City Thunder as the number 1 seed. The Houston Rockets as a surprise. They've performed exceptionally well this season, and the Houston Rockets are currently the number 2 seed, followed by the Memphis Grizzlies as the number 3 seed. And then the Denver Nuggets are currently the 4 seed. The Dallas Mavericks are currently the 5th seed. The Lakers are currently the 6th seed. The Clippers are currently the 7th seed. The Minnesota Timberwolves are currently the 8th seed. The San Antonio Spurs are currently the 9th seed. The Golden State Warriors are currently the 10th seed. And then there's 2 more seeds I do want to talk about. The Sacramento Kings are the 11th seed. You know, they're a team that I think was expected to do better than they've been. But the West has just so many good teams. So many good teams. You know, it's hard to compete in the West. The West is stacked with talent and good teams. And the 12th seed currently is the Phoenix Suns as the 12th seed. The last 3 teams in the West, you got the Portland Trail Blazers, the Utah Jazz, and the New Orleans Pelicans. They're at the very bottom. I think they have no chance of making the playoffs, no chance of making the play-ins. Oh, one more thing I want to mention too while talking about the standings. The Thunder are sitting at the top at number 1 with 30 wins. The Rockets are number 2, 6 games behind the Thunder. So I think the Thunder are comfortably in the 1 spot. They're so talented. They're so good as a team. I don't think another team will beat them out in the regular season. They will maintain that number 1 spot. The Rockets and the Grizzlies are the 2 and the 3, both sitting with 24 wins apiece. The Grizzlies have played 1 extra game than them. They have 1 extra loss, so therefore the Rockets are currently number 2 seed. The Grizzlies are the current number 3 seed. But I think those 2 teams could flip-flop back and forth, to be honest. They're really close in record, and I'm just gonna assume that they maintain the momentum that they've had in this regular season going into the playoffs. So similarly to the East, I don't think the standings are gonna change much. The one change in the East that I had was that I believe the 76ers would perform better as a team enough to make the play-in, and in the play-in be able to make their way into the 8th seed spot. That was my only really change in the East. The rest of the standings, I believe, will stay relatively where they're at. I don't think there'll be much flip-flopping. Like even with like I was thinking about Milwaukee and Orlando being the 4 and the 5 seed. I think those could flip, but even if they flipped and Milwaukee was the 4 seed and Orlando was the 5th seed, it'll still be the same matchup, and I'm betting on the Bucks to win that. So I don't really think there'll be much change. And another one I was thinking in the East was the Hawks and Pacers. If those two flip, it really doesn't matter because I think the Pacers will beat them out anyway in the play-in to get the 7th spot. And the Hawks would have to play to maintain their 8th seed spot. And I just think that they'll get upset by the 76ers. So regardless of whichever flipping happens in the East, I think that's how it'll stand. In the West, I'm maintaining the same perspective, with one difference compared to the East. So, for starters, the Kings and the Suns, they're currently at the 11th and 12th spot. They would not be in the play-in if the playoffs started today. As much as there's high expectation and high hopes on both of those teams being able to at least get in the play-in, I think that the Kings are currently inconsistent. They have some chemistry issues. They just fired a coach recently. They're going through a lot of changes. Adding a star player like DeMar DeRozan changes the makeup and the chemistry of the team, and I don't think they've got it figured out just yet. I think it's too far into the season for them to make a big push, although it's possible. I don't predict it'll happen. There's too much stacked talent and stacked teams above them for them to overcome the odds unless some team just has a major injury or just completely falls apart. If the teams above them maintain their current trajectory, the Kings are going to still win games. They're going to be tough matchups, but they're not going to do enough to break in. I think they're currently 5-5 in their last 10 games. I think they'll maintain a kind of a 500 record, and that's not enough in the West to push your way up into the standings. So the Kings, I think, will remain out of it. The Suns, I could predict the Suns do a little better record-wise, enough to maybe get up above the Kings' record, because right now they're sitting below the Kings in the standings. But I think due to injuries and their team just missing important pieces to make a solid, strong run, I still think they're a team that does not do enough to even make the play-in currently. So even if they improve their record and get above, like make it one spot up in the standings, that means they'll just go from the 12th seed to the 11th seed. It still wouldn't do enough to get them into the play-in. And above them is the Warriors. The Warriors are a 10th seed spot. I think the Warriors are going to put up a good fight all season long because they have hopes and aspirations to continue the legacy of the Warriors dynasty and get Steph Curry potentially to another championship. However, if they go into the play-in currently, the Spurs are right above them at the 9th seed. If the two of those two teams match up, the Spurs and the Warriors, I'm predicting that the Spurs would beat out the Warriors. I just don't believe that the Warriors are the same team that they were years ago. Able to make a strong playoff run, and they've made a bunch of changes to their team. They got rid of Klay Thompson. They now have Buddy Hield. Buddy Hield was playing good early in the season. He's now, his performance has dropped. In the starting lineup, they've made a bunch of changes. They had Draymond in the starting lineup. Now they got Kuminga. There's chemistry issues. They're still trying to figure stuff out as a team. They're winning some, they're losing some, winning some, losing some, and they're gonna have to fight so hard in the second half of the season. Guaranteed, they're gonna get kind of worn down, potentially an injury, injury threat, and I just think with the age of the team, they don't possess the same fight or cohesion to beat out the Spurs, in my opinion. The Spurs is a younger team. They're hungry. They got a lot of talent. And ultimately, I'm really banking on Wemby just being just a crazy matchup for anybody that have to face him. Even if they beat him, he's just a crazy player to have to play against. And in one game, I think the Spurs, led by, now they got Chris Paul on the team, I think they get it done. I think they do just enough to overcome the Warriors in the play-in. Mind you, this is the 9th, 10th seed matchup. So then they would have to play a second game to see if they can make it into the 8th seed spot. So in the 7th and 8th seed, assuming that the Clippers maintain the 7th seed spot and the Timberwolves maintain the 8th seed spot, I believe the Timberwolves would beat out the Clippers. I just think it comes down to matchup, and the Timberwolves being a hungry team. They've got some recent playoff success from last year. I think that they ride that success coming into the playoffs. They raise their level of play, and I think they do just enough to beat out the Clippers in a single game elimination. So regardless of what seeding they end up, whether it's the Clippers in 7 and the Timberwolves in 8, or vice versa, I think the Timberwolves will win that matchup, putting the Timberwolves at the 7th spot. Meaning the Clippers are at the 8th spot, they would have to match up against the Spurs. Now, I believe the Warriors are not the Warriors of old. Anybody still hanging on to the dynasty that the Warriors had with the Splash Brothers and Kevin Durant, that's not the same team. Andre Iguodala, they had JaVale McGee at one point. Sean Livingston. They had a solid team with a lot of depth. The starting lineup and the bench. This is not the same team anymore. This team right now, they're riding the coattails of Steph Curry, still being able to be Steph Curry, and while he'll have moments of brilliance and perform great, I think as a team they will not do enough to make the playoffs. I just don't think so. I think they could get beat out by the Spurs. On the other hand, I think the Clippers in that matchup could beat out the Spurs. Again, I think it comes down to matchups. Yeah, I predict the Clippers would lose to the Timberwolves, but I think that the Clippers could beat out the Spurs and maintain an 8th seed spot. So again, compared to the East, I predict that one play-in team outside the 8th spot can make their way in. In the West, I don't think it happens. I think everybody else maintains their position 1 through 8. The only difference is with the current standing that the 8th seed beat out the 7 to be the 7th, if that makes sense. So that means first round of the playoffs, you would have the Thunder versus the Clippers. I'm predicting that the Thunder beats the brakes off the Clippers. I'm going to give the Clippers one game. I'm going to say it goes 5 games. In the second spot, I'm going to assume that the Rockets and the Grizzlies maintain their position, which means the Rockets would play the Timberwolves. Yeah, the Rockets would play the Timberwolves. I believe the Rockets can beat out the Timberwolves. And I think my reasoning behind it is both are young teams with a lot of talent. And I think the Rockets have their current team chemistry, their huge coach improvement, and their momentum going into the playoffs. I think them as a young team will overcome the Timberwolves. The Timberwolves are a relatively young team too, but I think they're dealing with some chemistry issues. I think getting rid of Karl Anthony Towns was a bad move for them. I think Julius Randle is going to prove to be a little bit of a problem. They've already struggled early this season. I don't think they just magically get it together come playoff times. Depending on who they match up with, they could have success. I just think if they match up with the Rockets in round one, they lose. I'm gonna predict it goes. It could go 6 or 7 games. I'm gonna give it 7 games. Because I do think there'll be a relatively close matchup. 7 games with the Rockets winning and beating out the Timberwolves. Then we got the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies would be the 3rd seed matching up against the Lakers as the 6th seed. This is the first upset I got. I think the Lakers upset the Grizzlies. I think with the veteran leadership of LeBron, I think he will exploit holes in the matchup in a 7-game series. There's nobody that'll be better prepared and, have a game plan to beat out the Grizzlies. Plus, the Lakers have a decent team. Like, they have the new addition of Dalton Connect. They got Austin Reeves. They might even make some sort of blockbuster trade at the trade deadline and get another piece to the team. I can see that very well happening for the Lakers. If any team makes a major change, before the trade deadline, I could see the Lakers doing it more so than most other teams. And so I think the Lakers, in that particular matchup, I think they match up well versus the Grizzlies. And I think they would beat out the Grizzlies. They would just outplay them. So upset number 1. 2, the 4 and the 5 seed matchup is the Nuggets and the Mavericks. I predict that the Mavericks have gotten have made a better improvement from last season to this season than the Nuggets have. The Nuggets have the addition of... Hey, no, y'all gonna have to play upstairs. The Nuggets have the addition of Russell Westbrook, whereas the Mavericks have added Klay Thompson. I think that they're a better offensive unit right now than the Nuggets. And I think the Nuggets have had a little more struggles as of late than the Mavericks. The Mavericks are playing to par of what they normally do going into the playoffs. And I think that they, as a team, raise their level of play. Luka Doncic plays his best basketball. You got Kyrie Irving. I think Klay will have something to prove. I think as a team, they are a strong unit. And I think that their offense will outplay the Nuggets' offense. And I think it'll be an upset. I think this will be a fun matchup to see Euro versus Euro, with Luka Doncic versus Nikola Jokic. But I think the Mavericks get it done. They beat out the Nuggets in the first round of the playoffs, and I think it'll go. I'm gonna predict it goes 6 games. It could go 7. I'm gonna go with 6. Okay, so that would mean in round 2, it would be the Thunder as the 1 seed versus the Mavericks. Now, if you remember, last year in the playoffs, the Mavericks were the 5th seed, and they matched up against the Thunder in the second round as the 1 seed, and the Mavericks upset the Thunder in the playoffs. I don't think history repeats itself. I think they go back into the playoffs in the second round, same matchup. This time the Thunder gets it done. I believe it'll go 6 games, but I think the Thunder beat out the Mavericks in round 2, which means the next matchup would be the Rockets would end up matching up against the Lakers, since the Lakers, I'm predicting, will upset the Grizzlies. The Rockets, although I think as a young team, they're well coached, the whole 9, I think they have what it takes to beat out the beat out the Timberwolves. I think if they match up against the Lakers, I don't think it happens. I think the Lakers, veteran leadership, their experience, they will have a game plan set to beat a team that has virtually no playoff experience as a team. And I think that the Lakers would then upset the Rockets in round 2. I'm gonna predict that goes 6 games. I don't think it'll be easy games for the Lakers. That's another one that could go 7 games, but I'm gonna predict 6. I just think they'll beat out the Rockets due to them being young and inexperienced going into the playoffs. Which means in the conference finals, we would have the Thunder, the number 1 seed Thunder, versus the Lakers in the conference finals. The Lakers as the 6th seed, overcoming and upsetting 2 teams to get into the conference finals. Now, I know I said yesterday, I think Jordan's the GOAT, but LeBron's like, he's right there with Jordan. We're splitting hairs, and it comes down to just a little bit of bias in my feeling. Hey, y'all making too much noise. Take all of that upstairs. Brooklyn, take all of it upstairs. I'm not gonna tell you again. Might edit this out, might not. We'll see. Anyway, I was getting interrupted making videos. It's part of fatherhood and parenthood, I guess you could say. And you just got to do what you got to do. If I want to be a content creator and put content out, I gotta deal with having a family and doing what I have to do. So and there's just never a perfect time to make content in peace. I have to find time when I have it available, and so I'm just gonna push through anyway. So I'm predicting another upset. I'm predicting that the Lakers and LeBron James makes history and beats out the Thunder. I predicted they'll have so much momentum, so much motivation, so much drive in LeBron's 22nd season. This might be what makes LeBron the GOAT. If he does this in this year, this is what puts him over the top over Jordan. I think LeBron beats out the Thunder. I'm going to say that it goes 7 games. Tough back and forth to the down to the wire buzzer beater. I think it'll be a crazy matchup. The storylines, the media conversations, all the debate and talks about that series would be crazy. But I predict LeBron beats out the Thunder in the conference finals to be the Western Conference champions. Meaning the Lakers go to the finals, and the Lakers match up against the Boston Celtics in the finals 2025. And my prediction in the finals, I think the Celtics win. Sorry to disappoint. If you're a LeBron fan, if you're a Laker fan, and you want to see him make history by winning a fifth championship, as much as I think the Lakers has the ability to get there, I think if they match up with Boston, I think Boston wins. I think that team wins. I think that they're just going to be too tough, too dynamic of a team, too motivated to win versus LeBron to allow the Lakers to beat them. And they have plenty of experience at this point in their careers with Drew Holiday, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Kristaps Porzingis. I just think that there'll be too much for the Lakers. I think it'll go 6 games. I'm gonna predict 6 games, but I predict that the Boston Celtics win the finals and become back-to-back finals champions. That's my final prediction. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Hopefully I broke it down thoroughly, but also entertaining. I did kind of like pre-think this whole talk out ahead of time. So this is kind of like my second time talking through it. Hopefully I brought the same entertainment value that I had when I initially thought these things up. Because I'm telling you, when I was thinking through it, the matchups and everything, it was kind of blowing my mind initially. Just thinking about all the individual players. And come playoff time, I will do some breakdowns going into the playoffs, picking out the nitty gritty details of all the matchups, all the players. Maybe do some game by game type stuff, covering the series. But yeah, so yeah, hopefully I delivered this one good. Hope you guys enjoyed it. That's the end of this pod. I'll see you guys in the next one. This is Mike Robinson. Peace out.